Hello, everybody. So welcome to this session. I'm very excited to introduce this session and the different speakers today. So we have two great talks and a panel discussion where we will hear from all different sectors involved in the food system. So we'll have industry, academic, and public institutions that will be discussing this topic, and we also want to hear from you. So do not hesitate to ask the questions now I'm sure you're familiar with it, but we have this feature here on the left side of your screen. You can either chat or you can ask the questions. So the question section is really critical because we want to hear from you and have your inputs for the final discussion. So do not hesitate to use this feature here. And so you can also reach out to us via the Fit for Food e-booth. We want to hear again from you and your thoughts on the topic. So if you have not the time in the Q&A box here, do not hesitate to reach out to us in the e-booth. So I see that we have 75 participants. So let's go ahead and have our first speaker. So Jacqueline, if you want to join me on stage, on the virtual stage. So without further ado, our first speaker today is Professor Dr. Jacqueline Broerse from the Vrije University of Amsterdam, and she's the project coordinator of Fit for Food 2030. It's an EU-funded project that she will introduce today. So to start this session, she will introduce the food system transformation and the need for collaboration and responsible research and innovation. Jacqueline, up to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this introduction, and I'm very happy to be here. I hope everybody can hear me well. Yes, you can hear me, Matt? Okay, thank you very much. So it's a pleasure.
I can, yes.
I will pick up this presentation actually from Karen's presentation this morning, where she gave a very insightful keynote. And I would like to pick up on one of the most important conclusions she showed, and that is basically the urgency for system transformation and the role of R&I in it. The philosophy is that we are adhering to increasingly is that we are not going on the right path if we keep business as usual. We will have to change our conduct in the food system if we want to realize a healthy and sustainable planet and healthy people. We need a food system transformation, and research and innovation can be a driver, a catalyst for this. It has an important role to play. It can, for example, create a sense of urgency, show, if we continue like this, what the problems may be, but it can also very much show us the way forward, pathways for change. It can develop breakthroughs, innovations, both technical and social. And at the same time, it can understand how food system transformation can take place. So it's the food system itself as a study. And the 10 pathways of Food 2030 are actually very much about developing these breakthrough innovations. Where can we find leverage points to support through R&I this food system transformation process? But there is a but. Innovation not in itself, research and innovation, will automatically be able to contribute to food system transformation. What we have seen in the past that research and innovation focused on food system transformation often shows lower levels of adoption, poor scaling up, and may create unforeseen side effects. And so the interesting question then becomes, why is that the case? Why is it so complex to actually contribute with research and innovation to food system transformation? And that's basically because the food system is a complex adaptive system. So it is not going to easily change. It has resilience, and it's a complex system. One of my favorite pictures of the system is actually this one. And on purpose, this is very complex, and I don't want you to read it at all, but it shows how many different aspects in the system that are there with respect to distribution, production, consumption, policies, etc. And that means that if we are going to develop innovations that actually have to succeed in this complex system, we need to have system thinking in mind. I don't know why this is the case. What is going on here? Yeah, this is this one. So system thinking means that we are looking at the system and its complexity in showing how they are interconnected, synergies and trade-offs, understand and anticipate system dynamics in our innovation design, and that requires engagements of a wide variety of stakeholders. And why that's the case, let's take the example of the dietary shift. What we see a lot is that there are innovations trying to improve the quality of plant-based products that are going novel foods. We see projects that are trying to tackle consumers, raising awareness, changing diets, showing that it's important to increase plant-based nutrient foods. But we also see at the same time that there are trade-offs. We see that there are resistance in different stakeholders. People who are bypassing it altogether, people are strongly resisting it, not wanting to change diets because they are routine, because people attach a certain identity towards it. So we see on the other hand then industry having new products which don't find their way easily. Sometimes the products are more expensive. And so we see a whole kind of dynamic taking place that each of the interventions being developed not automatically easily quickly leads to a food system transformation where we have a much higher percentage of plant-based proteins. So all these stakeholders that are in that system actually need to work together to jointly develop new research and innovation. And that basically means that we're going into the field of responsible research and innovation. Innovation where in tangible spaces people actively engage together to develop new research and innovation. That means that there are certain new principles in research. This is not business as usual for research and innovation and for most stakeholders. We see that suddenly in the research process, diversity and inclusion becomes important. Remember, we need to anticipate the system, we need to reflect on it, to strategize for it together, create transparency, the issue of open science, much more than we are doing today. And also respond to one another, learn from each other, because it's not that one of the actors should dominate it. It should be a collaborative effort, so we should come to some sort of consensus and jointly plan for action. So that is not what all the different stakeholders are used to. Responsible research and innovation is a novel way of innovation. Now, the Fit for Food project, therefore, took as its starting point that we want to we realize that the system is resilient to change with solidified culture, structures, and practices, and that new research and innovation has to find its place in that system and to transform it. So we need spaces for transformation that bring together a variety of stakeholders. And for that, we have created platforms of living labs at multiple levels so that actors can actually jointly analyze, vision, plan, and experiment. Yeah. And in the project, it looks like this. It's a bit of a full one, but on the left-hand side, you see this wide variety of stakeholders. We specifically used a quadruple helix, so research, policy, business, civil society. Bring them together in policy labs at national level and city labs, and we have an interconnecting think tank. The policy labs work together to create new policies, new R&I policies to support these new agendas and pathways. And we have the city labs where we have stakeholders at local level that come together to build competencies And so actually prepare the different stakeholders better for conducting responsible research and information. And there are various other activities in the project to support these labs in doing their job. We do it in a phased way because such a network you don't build easily. It is something that you need dedicated attention for. You need flexibility. And so therefore, we, in a stepwise approach, we first have the actor identification and mobilization and start with those actors together visioning and doing a system analysis. We identify then the roadmaps, local roadmaps, like we have the EU roadmaps, but so these, some of them will, for example, much more focus on waste and others are focusing on the dietary shift. So you see local emphasis on the sort of roadmaps and what sort of showcases and breakthroughs to work from. Then the action planning and experimentation and the phase of scaling up. Just to give you a glimpse of the role of the businesses in the project, to round it off, we see that a lot of stakeholders are involved. Of course, we see the research institutes, knowledge and research institutes that form the majority. But also other stakeholders is very much involved, like policymakers, businesses, NGOs and CSOs, and funding agencies to a minor extent, and others. So they make up the other half. And if we zoom in on the businesses involved in Fit for Food, we see a very broad areas, like 10% are in the field of production, food production, 26% processing, 34% in the field of distribution, retail and marketing, and 9% are in the businesses related directly to consumption, and 21% other. So we have a very nice overview. Only the fisheries is somewhat minor, but this is a good basis to actually jointly work together to do this. And industry has an important role to play. They really provide new opportunities for innovation. And for them also, it's an inroad to creating shared value with society in new combinations, in new collaborations. However, we did notice that problems may arise in the field of investments and competition. That's also there. So it's not always easy for industry to be very open and transparent in these collaborations. And we did notice that responsible research and innovation was something new to get used to. But on the other hand, it can really provide a way, if you have the right leadership, as a business, you can get engaged in responsible research and innovation, and also do that within your business in a stepwise approach. Going, first of all, commitment from leadership to context analysis, and experiment also, validate and design roadmaps. Actually, basically, as we did within the project Fit for Food, it also within each and every organization is a stepwise learning process. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So do not hesitate if you have questions again to ask those questions in the question section on the left part of your corner of the screen, sorry. I have maybe a burning question regarding the numbers of businesses involved in stakeholders that you presented. So you said 165 businesses. Maybe can you give more details on how you created this network, especially with the industry?
Yeah. No, they are linked to in most cases, the industry, the businesses are linked to the different labs. So each lab has a coordinator. At the level of the cities, it's a city lab coordinator that's either a science center or a science shop, so closely linked to research and innovation. And at those levels, the lab coordinators bring people together. They invite them. And so they invite the people from research, policy making, civil society, and businesses. And those are the ones that are interested in food system transformation. So these businesses have already an idea that they want to play a role in this transformation process. And then together with them, we develop a joint vision for that specific city lab. And the same we do at national level. At national level, it is linked to ministries. The lab coordinators have to have the approval, the backing of at least 2 different ministries. And then they do this at national level and try to develop new policies. So what comes out are research agendas, policy briefs, but also new calls for proposal. And businesses are at the table.
Okay, thank you. And okay, thank you. And related to this question, there's a question from the participants on how can a company apply to join Fit for Food 2030 and all these costs entail to join. So I'll, Jacqueline.
Well, unfortunately, the project is going to its end. So there are within the Fit for Food project, not much more specific activities. On the website of the Fit for Food project, we show when there are certain activities within the city labs and the policy labs. We have a final conference coming up on the 24th and the 25th of November. And we have specifically a food transformation network. And that's basically more of a virtual platform, a digital platform where we can, especially in this one, will remain after the project ends. But also many of the activities of the city labs and the food labs, the policy labs will remain. It's not something that stops. They are going to continue this. So please stay tuned if you have a city or policy lab in your country.
Yeah, thank you, Jacqueline. And just to add to this, as you mentioned, the Food Systems Transformation Network, if you want to have the address to join, go on the e-booth and I will be happy to provide that information to you. So
yes, that would be great.
Yeah,
more can join. It's a collaborative effort. We have to do it together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So thank you, Jacqueline, and we'll welcome you back in the panel discussion. So our second speaker is now Dr. Jonas Lazaro Mojica. Sorry if I mispronounce. From FoodDrinkEurope and the European transfer platform ETP Food for Life. He will give more insight into Fit for Food 2030 project and talk about the food industry contribution in Food 2030 and other paths of action towards R&I policy. Jonas?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. You hear me properly?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Matt and ILSI, for allowing me to be here today, and thank you for all the 105 people that are on the other side of the screen. So first, declaration of interest. So I represent FoodDrinkEurope and ETP Food for Life. So I shall say that I represent the industry-led stakeholder forum. And I would like to introduce my talk by in the same point as Karen and Jacqueline mentioned this morning, but also from the food industry perspective. So the first question is, why do we need research and innovation agendas, and why we need this in the EU, and why we need this in the food systems? They already answered that. So the answer is that the food sector is under pressure. I shall add that the food sector is the biggest in Europe and generates 3 trillion euros of turnover per year. And that's a massive sector that we have to consider. And obviously we are in a situation now where we have many challenges ahead. I quite like this picture because it reflects the situation right now. So we have COVID-19 that is perceived as a wave that is coming. Then we might have an economical recession with things that comes as trade or Brexit. And we have climate change and environmental sustainability over the top. So I will say that that's why research and innovation is needed more than ever, and why is so crucial in the food systems. But food systems, and Jacqueline explained, chose in purpose the same slide, but it's because it really shows the complexity. I have to say that I worked about 15 years in food industry. I didn't hear about food system that much until I came to Brussels. But it's a key concept to understand it, because it means that anything that we do in the food systems, it has a trade-off, it has a response. So it might be jobs, it might be price volatility, it might be policies that become different in different countries. So all this has to be taken into account when we make policies and we make R&I policies. And talking about R&I policies, Karen explained this morning very nicely Food 2030 in the Horizon Europe. She also mentioned the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork. But when we think of R&I policies, it incorporates much more. And when we think of European projects, we have to have all these policies in mind. So we have to think of the CAP policy in agriculture, the Circular Economy Action Plan, the bioeconomy, the fisheries, the biodiversity strategy. Many of those were launched this year, but we also have to think, for example, of upcoming ones like the chemical strategy for sustainability that is coming in this October. How this is perceived from the industry, what is the impact that these R&I policies, and sometimes from the industry, as Jacqueline was mentioning, we face hurdles. I should say as industry, but perhaps as a society. And perhaps the first one is what the return of this investment. Obviously, here I'm addressing R&I policies addressed to pre-competitive R&I precisely. So we are thinking of all that has an input into society, but how do we measure that? How do we measure that impact in societal challenges? How to scale up that from our industries? How do we know how the market will uptake that? What will be our trade-offs if we substitute plastics, for example? If we reduce meat, how this affects our food systems? Knowledge transfer to farmers as well. All these needs a systemic approach, as Jacqueline was nicely addressing. And how do we do it? We can do it through a multi-stakeholder approach. This is not my concept. I think it's a comprehensible concept for all the actors that sit in the table and can discuss all R&I agendas. Perhaps one point that we still discuss in the table is how do we account for each stakeholder? How do we make it just for all the pieces? For example, from the food industry, that we have a big saying on the final user in the impact. We think our contribution is really crucial to deliver it to the final users and consumers. How do we account for these R&I policies? And how do we, food industry, can organize itself to tell the European Commission, also nationally, what are strategic research topics and agendas? Here, just put some examples, so I apologize for not incorporating them all. This is just my nearby environment. So I will say ETP Food for Life is a stakeholder forum with industry and academia join forces to discuss these topics. We have the national food and technology platforms that do the same at national level per member state. We have public-private partnerships. Now they are called institutional, like the EIT Food or the BBI biorefineries. They also put strategic research and innovation agendas. I would like to put also another example, and that will be the Feed for Food 2030 project, which perhaps is what brings me here today. So this was a project that started about 3 years ago, and the aim was to support the European Commission on how to implement Food 2030 research and innovation policy framework to future-proof the European food systems, or what is the same, how to put or perform the topics that are needed to really change our food systems. Someone already asked how industry was involved here. So the first point was the living labs, where at national level, different regions even had incorporated SMEs, startups, entrepreneurs there. But this project also had umbrella associations like the ETP Food for Life, ILSI Europe, UFIC, or the IT Food within their members. This project is at the end, and we have some outcomes. I would just like to pass very quickly over this, because we used a model to think of breakthroughs and topics that will develop in the future. So what's needed for the future? We use this model. We could have used another one. There are others like the funnel tunnel for a more market-based approach. This is more a theoretical approach on how breakthroughs become reality, looking at real cases, looking at what are the trends in the society, the trends in the food sector, but also what is happening, what are the enterprises, what are the projects that are showing innovation in our food systems. Here you have a definition of breakthroughs, but I think I will run through. Sorry, I just want to go up ahead. So to some outcomes of the Fit for Food 2030 project. So this project will have a final presentation, but it has some outputs that I think they are materials and tools very interesting, and anyone from academia or policy making that wants to address R&I policies. So we created some inventory of trends, trend cards, we call it informally, inventory of R&I breakthroughs, inventory of cases, so what is happening there, and a lot of training and workshop materials and tools. And believe me, for anyone who wants to work on topics, these materials are great to actually have a map to start discussing and to have a brainstorming on what are the needed R&I breakthroughs for the future. There you have the link for the website where you can find all these materials. Finally, I would like just to say or mention what other relevant interactions industry has with the European Commission, but also with our members. So we have the ETP for Life that I already mentioned. There you find the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, the Implementation Action Plan, a report specifically to SME needs, and a declaration from many companies, including SMEs, on the R&I needed. We also have joint statements with Mojica, the farmers representatives, and also other ETPs. Which brings me to this slide, which is my last one. This is players that we have, these relevant platforms, ILSI, obviously, but we have the national food technology platforms at national level, the EIT Food, other public partnerships like SUSFood2, which also provides research and innovation agendas, also the JPIs, Pache, Healthy Diet for Healthy Life, but also Oceans provides very interesting inputs. Other ETPs like TP Organics, Plants for the Future, Aquaculture, the Animal Task Force, Manufacture, and also the trade representatives of the sectors like Eurocommerce, FoodDrinkEurope, which I represent, and Mojica. Obviously, this was a very overview of many activities, but I hope this can boost the panel on the next questions that we'll have on how further we can engage on R&I agendas. And that will be all. Thank you from my side.
Thank you, Jonas, for the very nice presentation. Sorry. So again, if you have questions, do not hesitate to ask them on the left side of your screen. Sorry, on the question button. I have a quick question from the. So maybe because obviously there's a lot of work done on Fit for Food and you didn't have the time to present all that, but maybe an interesting question from the audience here is how can the industry actually can take up from this European project and take that for them, and how, so is there any business opportunity and how can they work around this to basically have to be able to uptake the results of the project?
Mm-hmm. I think the results of the project were aimed to work on Food 2030. So obviously we have European Commission policy behind, and we have to be aware that we are disseminating is a policy that is in Europe that is sort of guiding how the food system transformation will happen. What this project provided was a lot of materials for stakeholders to use. For many of these results are already public, so they are in the website, but it really helps to any company, industry, entrepreneur, or even agencies to pick up these materials to actually construct brainstorming based in something that is already available. So if your question is, what are the current trends in food system transformation? What are the current topics that we could look at, like from genetic engineering to social innovation to any topic that you might think of that refers to pre-competitive business, you will find it there. So that will be my quick answer. Thank you, Jonas.
Very interesting indeed. And now I will welcome everybody on stage, on the virtual stage, for the panel discussion. So I will invite Jacqueline to join back. And I'm also welcoming back Dr. Karen Fabbri from the European Commission and DG Research Innovation. So she gave a very nice keynote this morning. So welcome back, Karen. And I also want to welcome Dr. Gert Meijer, sorry for mispronouncing, Maybe you want to chair of the European Technology Transfer Food for Life. So I'm just going to close this presentation. Yeah. So welcome everybody on stage. So again, for this panel discussion, we have 110 participants for the panel discussion. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Do not hesitate to ask questions again on the left side of the screen. So for the first question and to start this discussion, maybe Karen, a question for you. What do you think could be the role of industry in contributing to food system transformation?
So thank you, Matt, for that question. And I'm delighted to be involved in the panel and see some familiar faces. So Jacqueline, Jonas, and Gert, nice to be here to have this discussion with you all and the other participants watching us today. So how can the industry be involved in transforming food systems? What could be their role? Well, we know there's definitely a need for more action from governments. But yes, there's also a need from industry and SMEs to transform our food systems for co-benefits. Now, this will include more bold action on research and innovation. And industry is actually being asked to do this within the context of the new Farm to Fork strategy, its deployment, and also in the context of next year's World Food Systems Summit. I'd like to mention that the Farm to Fork strategy, which contains 27 actions, has two particular actions that are of interest to the food industry. There are, of course, more, but in particular, these two. They're actions 13 and 14, which are currently non-regulatory, hence voluntary. The first of these is an initiative to improve the corporate governance framework, including a requirement for the food industry to integrate sustainability into corporate strategies. And there's Action 14, which actually focuses on developing an EU code and monitoring framework for responsible business and marketing conduct in the food supply chain. So both of these actions can really benefit from research and innovation relevant to institutional innovation and, of course, responsible research and innovation. But they cannot be done alone. They're also very much linked to the ongoing debate on how we can put in place a mechanism and really a culture where we can pay the true cost of food, a true cost that will embed the positive and negative externalities. So I'd like to stop here because I think there's other points that perhaps need to be discussed, and I leave this as food for thought. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Maybe Gert, you want to add to this and maybe give more of an industry perspective to the same question. So how can the industry contribute to responsible research innovation in the context of food system transformation?
No, I think totally agree with what Karen was saying, and I think a challenge there is to make sure that we take this action with the whole food industry. The large food companies you see clearly moving towards sustainability goals, understand the food system change that is ongoing and that is necessary, but the far majority of food companies, and including the agricultural sector, are small and medium-sized enterprises. And to take them with us in this process, so to say, is going to be a challenge. But that needs to happen.
Okay, thank you. So maybe still with you, Gert, maybe can you indicate what you would like to see from the public institution, maybe to help you or to move forward more responsible research in this context?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're talking about an enormous task ahead of us. And both Jacqueline and Jonas showed the complexity of the food system. So needless to say that there's an enormous number of players here, and we basically have to find ways to leverage all those actors in this change that we need. We need to do that for long-term research objectives, short-term research objectives, but also again, looking at small and medium-sized enterprises for the education, knowledge transfer, and dissemination. And we believe that we as the European Technology Platform for the food sector, that public-private partnerships are a very important instrument, and obviously we need the public sector for that in order to establish those partnerships. And furthermore, and that's a call to action, it's phenomenally important that the European Commission, but also the member states in the European Union design a comprehensive strategy. Horizon Europe seems a wonderful platform to do that. Where this necessary transformation is being addressed, and we're not only talking about a higher need for funding of those activities, but also, and Karen, you were alluding to that, regulations are also important. We have to make sure that we don't create regulatory bottlenecks, and there should be more engagement also between the public sector and the private sector. I think we all agree this needs to be done together. So that's very difficult to do without interaction.
Thank you. Maybe Jacqueline, I saw you wanted to add something.
No, I think there's an important, for Karen, because you are actually pointing out at public-private partnerships, and I think they are in the making, Karen.
Shall I come in on that?
Yes, I think so.
All right, we're happy to do so. Yes, we are. In fact, we're ready to facilitate this action through the buildup of the Horizon Europe Food Systems Partnership that should go well beyond the classic public-private constructions of the past. It should also include citizens, communities, institutions, and it should be systemic to deploy solutions, those of the Farm to Fork and wider Green Deal. So we're in the process of building this partnership up. It should be officially launched in 2023. So we have some time now to really, put our collective minds together and see how such a structure could be governed, who has to be in the structure, what kind of decisions, what kind of actions can be done together within that context, and when. So we have a lot of work to do. We've got to pull up our sleeves and work together.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I'll go to the question section from the audience. There's a question here from Brian Hanley, maybe more on the specific Fit for Food and maybe Food 2030 project. Are there any best practices for supply chains and systems for that the food system can learn from? So is there any past experience that we can basically learn from and move forward with this with responsible research? So maybe Jonas or Jacqueline?
Well, actually, I think it's in your corner, Matt. It's about showcases, I would say.
Yeah, I didn't. You want me to go ahead or?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is part of work package 3, where basically part of the project was to identify past practices and learn from those past practices, and basically trying to see how current industry and businesses can learn from them and basically use what works and learn from what didn't work and basically move forward with this approach. So this is indeed part of the Fit for Food project.
Unfortunately, there were no ideal cases. So there was nothing where, and that has to do also because this way of thinking with the systems approach and responsible research innovation, you see that many of the innovation processes are not shaped like that. So what we found was look at showcases that come as close as possible, and then learn from it. So again, on the website we have I think you identified something like over 100 cases, and then in the end we have about 12 that are very insightful on how you can, at a more local level, but also at a national level, at a program level, move things forward.
Thank you. Yeah. So maybe going back to a bigger picture. So we mentioned the food system partnership as a concrete step forward for the industry to contribute more to responsible research. Are there any other concrete step forwards that we can take, the industry and the public institution can take to take up to this next level? So I don't know who wants to start here. It's a very difficult question, I know, but maybe, no, nobody? Okay, Karen, go ahead.
I'm happy to come in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Shall I go? Shall I have a go at this, Matt? So I think what we need to do is we need industry to engage with us, not just at research level, but also at CEO level. These issues need to be brought up at the highest level within companies, so that there really is a taking up of this vision to transform food systems, this vision for co-benefits, because that's another thing. You'll see actions on one particular area, perhaps food waste, but then there won't be actions maybe related to health. So how can we engage CEOs at the highest level in industry and also amongst SMEs to take up this responsibility, this commitment to foster co-benefits as much as possible, as much as the market will allow, to foster co-benefits together. Another is how is industry going to be contributing to the UN World Food System Summit? This is a unique opportunity to get us to take a leap forward altogether, to really get us to another space where we want to be, a more ambitious space. And I'd say another issue that's important is, can industry help us with spaces for experimentation, for piloting, for demonstrating things that can actually work with citizens? Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. So go ahead if you want to add anything. Just, I don't have to.
Yeah, I think there are two important things that I would like to stress is also the role of the consumers in this. Often they are seen as slow in picking things up and that they need to be educated. But at the same time, there's a lot of innovative capacity in consumers and citizens as well. And that's to pick up on one of the last points that Karen said, is that how can we really involve and connect to these citizens? And well, one of the things is I think what is very important is jointly do research. So engage citizens in citizen science, in other ways, because through action and joint action, you achieve more than just by sending messages out that you should do this or you should refrain from that. We know that that doesn't work, but by doing collaboratively things together, that changes. And I think another thing is, Karen mentioned co-benefits, but at the other end, Jonas, you said it as well, there are losers. In the sense that, for example, with the dietary shift, there are industries going to see their businesses deteriorate and perhaps even become totally uncompetitive and need to make a huge transformation, which may not be possible. And to include that in thinking about this transformation process is equally important. So how can we somehow, soften things for those that will lose out here, perhaps?
Yeah, again, I think for me that centers a lot around small and medium-sized enterprises. Also, I know there's a deep desire in the European Commission to talk with CEOs. The CEOs of the big companies are already moving, because those companies are already moving in the direction. So yeah, we could see to get time in their agenda to repeat what they've already said, but now in Brussels. Of course, given the current travel restrictions, that's not going to be easy. But it's more the logistics challenges that I see there relative to the CEOs of the large companies. Where you mentioned CEOs of the small and medium-sized enterprise, and I think that is really the big challenge. And indeed, Jacqueline, it will be especially the smaller and medium-sized enterprises that are currently in a value chain as part of the food system or a specific production of products that we really do not want consumers to eat too much of, that might be heard. And they typically, because of their scale, have less degrees of freedom to do something different. But they do need to do something different. This is not about, if you want to collaborate on this, this is not about putting companies out of business. It's about creating other business opportunities. And again, I think the small and medium-sized enterprises, Jonas knows that better by heart than I, but what is it, Jonas? More than 95% of at least the food processing companies are small and medium-sized enterprises. So we're talking about an enormous number. And to connect with them and to make sure that they play an active role in this transformation, for me, continues to be the true largest challenge.
Yeah, that's the largest challenge, I would say.
Yeah, if I may add there, Gert, I think we have a sector that is different than other sectors in the amount of small and medium enterprises it has, but as well, it's a sectorial-based sector. We have many different actors, from fisheries to farmers to processors in the bakery. So at the end, when we try to make these R&I policies, they have to be attractive to many of them, and that's a very difficult challenge. I'm not taking the merit for Karen for doing it every cycle to try to do that, but indeed it's a challenge. But we need really a program in Cluster 6, a partnership that really can attract their attention and can bring them in to really feel that they are part of that system transformation. As I was mentioning before, when I work in a medium-sized enterprise, I never heard of food systems before until I came to Brussels. And probably I was quite disinformed, but I think it's difficult to reach to them very often. And that's a challenge for all of us.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe because there are a lot of talks about collaboration, indeed platforms that really strive into creating this environment and this collaborating effort is really critical. So platforms like ILSI Europe, ETP Food for Life are really critical in creating these collaborations and fostering this responsible research. So we have 1 minute left. So if you have any last words you want to share with the audience, now it's the time. And again, the discussion will follow in the e-booth. So if you have any additional comments from the participants, please add them to the e-booth. 38 seconds. So any quick comments or words that you want to share? Otherwise,
I can come in with just one key word, and that's education and meeting the skills gap, so that we can help transform some of these industries. That's another issue that is really key and is also relevant to responsible research and innovation, bringing in that education aspect on systems training and in vocational skills and also in higher education. Can't forget that.
And to add in the last minutes, Fit for Food has done 18 of those modules, and they are available online. Different sort of modules.
Gert, you have the last word. Do you have anything to add?
No, I just that I wanted to raise my thumb, but I totally agree. That's it's not education of consumers only, it's education, training, knowledge transfer, incredibly important. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for this really, really nice panel discussion.